We're going to have a panel now. The panel is going to be moderated by Callum from Snap. And we're going to basically be talking about the art of making data-driven creative decisions. So it kind of links nicely in with what's going on. Oh, it's more of a fireside chat, I'm told. My notes describe it as a panel, but fireside chat sounds good.
Guys, it's absolutely fantastic for you to see you all here today. I am overwhelmed by just how many people have turned up. It's a brilliant to see people in person again. And just by way of introductions, I'd like to call Lamia Shreim to the stage and Elise Zareie as well. Lamia from Tamatem and Elise from Miri Growth.
Hi.
Hi.
So happy to have you both here today. It's absolutely brilliant to see you in person. Yeah. We are going to host a panel discussion around the importance of creative and data-driven decisions in a post-IDFA world. As we all know, there have been obviously huge changes that we're all experiencing, and creatives have started to play such a huge part in that decision-making process. And I wanted to kind of hear some of the experiences, and both Lamia and Elise have joined on the stage today really to share their expertise. By way of introductions, Lamia, do you want to just tell them a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. Great to be here. Thank you, Callum. And great to be joining you as well. So my name is Lamia Shreim. I work at Tamatem. So Tamatem is the leading mobiles game publisher in the MENA to the Arabic-speaking market, basically. I've been with Tamatem for almost 6 years and a half, and I'm the marketing manager here. And can't wait to kick off this panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Lamia. Elise, a bit about yourself.
Hey, hi everyone. I'm Elise Zareie. I'm a senior performance marketing manager at Miri Growth, a UA agency in London. So we're basically very close to here, so I don't have to travel much, which is really nice. Miri Growth really specializes in the creative approach to user acquisition. So we do UA campaign management, but we also produce all our creatives in-house. I've been with Miri for now 3 years, and it's a super exciting time to be in the industry.
Amazing. Great to have you on stage. And my name's Callum. I lead the growth team at Snap, specializing on the gaming team. And I've been at Snap for 3 years and get a chance to work with these guys on a near day-to-day basis. So thank you very much for joining us. Where to kick off? Let's talk about kind of how you prepared. We'll go a little bit top level to start, and then we'll start to dive down more deeply into creatives. How did you both, and in the different companies, prepare for the ATT and the changes that were inevitably going to happen last April? Lamia, do you want to start?
Yeah, of course. I think everyone was shocked with like iOS 14 and ATT and everything that changes that was going to happen. And I think literally no one knew what was about to happen. And I think until today, like, we're still questioning whether what we're doing is right or wrong. To be honest, what was amazing about it, it was something new, something different, which was very exciting. Because I think in terms of UA and with creatives and everything, it was, I wouldn't say a bit easy, but it was much easier to optimize, much easier to target different audiences, do multiple testing. And now things changed, and you're basically blinded by this whole doing any campaign or targeting different users because you can't see data based on cohort level, and you're just blinded by that. I think we'll talk more about like the changes that we implemented after ATT, but I guess it was a new, challenging experience for us at Tamatem.
And Elise, just for you, so as an agency, I've known Miri since your inception. How did Miri change and pivot from pre-ATT to post-ATT?
So, I mean, first of all, it was kind of preparing for a storm, but we didn't know exactly what was going to happen. We would get very few informations, and we were trying to plan as much as possible for it without knowing much. I think in the end, we were over-prepared for the unknown, and it was a little rocky, but it went smoother in the end. It did really confirm that creative should be the center of what we're working on in UA, because on multiple network, more and more, we're kind of losing control of how to optimize, how to launch a campaign, how to target a specific audience, like Lamia mentioned. And we're really finding that creative concepts and ideation should be the center of trying to reach scale. And then in terms of, I don't know, how to specifically prepare for it, I think we were trying to talk with clients as much as humanly possible and get as much input as we could from MMPs as well. So this way we were set for it.
So talking a little bit about how you prepared for it. In terms of now, we find ourselves 9 months later. Have you had to pivot further? Have you found yourself 9 months later kind of still implementing the same changes that you made back in last April? Or have you had to change, has your resourcing had to change as a result of those changes? Elise, do you want to start with you maybe?
Sure. I think what kind of changed and what we're still figuring it out, exploring, is how to test our creatives. So before that, we kind of had a systemic approach doing split testing on Facebook, on iOS, for example, and then we were just guessing that we had to switch everything to Android, which we have done. But then in the meantime, we figured out that there were other ways we could test our creatives that would work with the new iOS. I think we're still figuring it out. We're still challenging the way we're testing internally, but it was a good shakeup because we had our creative testing method going on for 3 years before that, and we kind of challenged it. We were relying on it quite a lot. So that's definitely what changed, I think.
And for you, Lamia?
Yeah, I agree, actually. So what we did, actually, the whole process of ATT made our process at Tamatem much more organized and clearer. And even it pushed like the creative team and the UA team to work 10 times harder, I would say, in terms of look at data and be like motivated into making this creative work or these creatives work. I guess before ATT, we were not organized in terms of doing different themes, like whether it's with influencers, human element, fake ads, and so on and so forth. And now we work on a very dedicated thing where we work on objectives for a certain ad set with different themes. So we had a theme for specifically different creatives for influencers, different creatives for human element, different creatives for gameplay, and so on. And with that, we realized it still needs more to that. So we're now moving into this, what we call Tamatem motivations. What is the user persona? So some users come through our game just to look around, to chat here and there, because most of our games are very social apps. Some are very engaged and want to win over people. So these are the more in the terms of the gameplay and what want to be challenged, let's say. So now we work on more motivational ad themes. And I guess with that, a lot of things changed for us. Our creatives got 10 times better. The way we're targeting our users got so much better because we're focusing a lot on creatives and not just on who we're targeting. It's more on who we're targeting within these creatives, let's say.
Super interesting. And just throwing back to Elise, talk to me a little bit about your creative testing methodologies now in a post-ATT world. How do you now, or do you define your testing framework exactly the same for every single company that you're working with? Or do you do it on a very much more bespoke level and that testing framework changes on a per client basis? If you could talk a little bit about it.
So it definitely changes on a client basis. I don't think we would test creatives the same way with a client that spends the most on TikTok in comparison with a client who spends a lot on Unity or Google. We're going to change how long we're testing the creatives, how much we're spending in the test, how we're splitting the creatives. I think what hasn't really changed is our cycle of creative production. So for each client we're making 2 new concepts and 3 iterations a week, which we are testing regularly. And how we're deciding on those iterations is that we compare the performance of those 5 new creatives to a control. And if we're finding that a creative is really close to the control but not quite beating it, we will iterate on it by changing something in the ad, not just a color, but something a little bit deeper to try to make it perform better. And by having this approach of balancing completely new concepts that are out of the box and iterations of things that show potential, we're really trying to find a creative win. So as I mentioned before that, we would do a split test, really favoring Facebook as the channel to test. But we're finding now that if we're spending heavily on TikTok, we would have to move our testing to TikTok. If we're spending heavily on Snap, we would have to move that testing to Snap. And then we would use the tools that are specific to each platform that exist or that don't exist to run that test. I think the transferability from a platform to another is not necessarily mirrored between each platform. For example, between Snapchat and TikTok, there's a lot more similarities in terms of what kind of creatives are going to work, but let's say that Google is kind of its own island, its own thing, so we would need to test creatives on Google to see if they work on Google, if that makes sense.
And Lamia, what about you guys? I'm going to talk more about the specifics around Tamatem games in a second and the culturalization piece, but talk to me a little bit about your testing framework. How do you guys work with Snap, for example, versus TikTok versus Facebook? Do you have a different approach per platform?
Yeah, of course. Just like you mentioned, it's so different. For us, even Snapchat is different than TikTok. So with Snapchat, we deal a lot with influencers with influencer marketing in general. So with performance marketing, what we try to do is integrate the influencers that we work with as creatives. And we realize that Snapchat is the best platform for that because in the region, specifically in GCC, they love influencers and they watch them on Snapchat, this is the #1 network for them. So when you integrate influencers into creatives, you're seeing excellent performance. Other ad themes works, but also it depends on each game. So each game is different, but what we realized across all of our portfolio, let's say, influencer creatives works best. For TikTok, we work more on doing TikToks, less than doing creatives. So we try to do different themes with introducing the more of a human element and then gameplay, and try to do like TikToks that if someone is seeing our ad, it's actually a TikTok and it's not an ad, basically. Because users on TikTok are completely different than any other platform. And just like you mentioned with Google, it's like Google Ads, like you have to work a lot on text, on static images, on videos, so it has a lot of combination of so many things, which is very interesting for us because Google works great if you iterate on the text itself, like with search campaigns. It's amazing the difference that you would see when you're being very creative with the text themselves and like the different dialects you introduce to every single country.
Fantastic. And bit of a leading question, Zach. In terms of how important does localization now play? So, Elise, I'm going to ask you first because it's going to be a leading question into Lamia. But does localization play an even bigger part nowadays than it had before, previously?
Yeah, so for example, on Snap with a title I was working with, the game itself is localized in multiple language, and I think it was in UAE where we tried to run ads in English in parallel and then ads in Arab, and ads in Arab would get a lot more traction, so I think users do appreciate when there is a clearer flow between the ads they're seeing, the App Store, and then the game in the language of the countries they're in. We have seen localization being not as efficient with countries in T1 that have higher English proficiency. We can get away with running campaigns all in English. And something I would add is if you are aware of some pop culture elements or some really cultural elements that you can adapt within the ads to make it more relevant to the audience, not just a flag, but like, for example, I'm French and I know about French influencers. So if I'm doing French localization, I'm going to use that vocabulary and those buzzwords on French, on creatives that are translated to make them work better. And that's more case specific, but you can also have this approach.
I think it's fair to say kind of more than any other geo that France is a country that really enforces the use of the French language, and
yes.
Unless it's specific to the Toubon law and you've got the App Store page in local in French, that it makes it very difficult. Leading question, as I said. Tamatem is known for the culturalization of games. Now, the culturalization of games is taking Western games and culturalizing them for the Arabic market. Tell me a little bit about that. Tell the audience what makes Tamatem so special. Tell me what kind of stands you apart in the market.
Yeah, so basically, like you said, it's culturalization. It's not to localize your game or the creatives that you have. It's not like translating from English to Arabic or whatever. It's more on how can you get to the user watching your ad. So I tell you, like with the simplest things, we have a very popular cards game which is called VIP Balut. Balut is like a huge popular game in Saudi Arabia. It's like their #1 cards game. And what we try to do is not only do the creatives, like to show them Balut, to actually show them that the cards are relevant to the football team that they love or that they cheer, the background of the table that they're playing on, the voiceovers. So the voiceovers are different dialects based on who's watching that ad. And so many things are taken into factor with doing these creatives. So I guess, again, it depends a lot on each game. And we worked a lot with Clash of Empires, our strategy game. And Clash of Empires, for example, it was after ATT, so we had no clue about it. Like with other games, we had data on them. We knew what was working, what was not working. So Clash was something very interesting to tackle. And having different flags. So what we did is that we did creatives based on, so each country would get their flags that this country would win this battle. And the engagement that we saw from that was huge, huge, huge. Because people pride that their country is winning. We always thought like fail ads are the things that it would work, and we tested it out, and surprisingly it was having like success, like their country is winning, for example, and they're winning the battle is something that would change the whole scenario and get you 10 times better the CTR.
Fascinating. And in terms of kind of how you kind of go about developing the games, or from initial conversation that you have with the Western developer through to the actual launch of the gaming title, give us an idea of what the kind of the process looks like and how long it takes.
Yeah, so it depends. So at the moment at Tamatem, we try to only publish games that we know definitely it will work in the region. And how we know that, it's all purely based on metrics for that game. And we really care about the social aspect of it. People in GCC and MENA in general love the social aspect, love to chat, love voice chats, love to talk to each other, love the essence of being there and seeing other people see them in terms of being on top of the leaderboard, being the most famous, the highest influencer, the most liked picture, having the highest in-game currency. So all of these are a huge factor into what games we want to take on board. We also look at like evergreen games, games that you can play and play and play for the longest time and not get bored of them, which is more on the strategy, RPG, and cards genre, let's say. So I would say like games who are much more like hyper casual games and casual games like match 3 games do not really work in the region, because for a match 3 game, it's more of I'm playing Candy Crush or I'm playing Toy Blast. And if you localize it or make it culturally relevant to the user, it will not be that different. And these games depend a lot on a huge user base to spend little amount of money. And for MENA, it's not that case. It's more on you have this reach, which is not a lot, and you're depending a lot on high spenders and not on like small spenders, let's say.
Fascinating. Yeah. Elise, from Miri's perspective, talk to me a little bit about how you guys stand apart as a UA creative agency, and the kind of the framework that you build with the relationships that you have with your clients. Talk to me about the testing strategy that you guys have, the kind of the creative iteration that you adopt, the different types of creative that you guys adopt as well.
Yeah, so as I've mentioned before, we have this framework with each of our clients of having 2 new concepts and 3 iterations that we cyclically test to find a winner, either against a control, or if we don't test it with a control, we will have benchmarks of main KPIs, like what kind of CPI, what kind of click-through rate, what kind of impression to install we should get for that market. In terms of how we're getting the ideas, we really try to do a mix of looking into the game and looking at what's specific about the game and doing a lot of trend analysis and trend research. So we use the ad library of Facebook quite a lot to look at what competitors are doing, direct competitors of this game category, but also I think we can find a lot of inspiration in other categories. So for example, if we're working mostly with casual, we're still going to look at narrative games as inspiration of what we could be doing. For example, if we add a narrative intro to a casual ad, we might get a lot of traction there because it adds a storyline and it adds a context to the ad itself. So we're trying to really look at what the industry is doing, how we can get inspiration. I think we try to think outside of the box too by looking at more direct trends on Reddit or on Instagram, look at what's trending this week and make an ad with this theme. In terms of execution, at Miri, we're really specialized in motion graphic design, so the fact that creative is the center of what we're doing is also because half of our team, we're about 30, is motion graphic designers. So we don't outsource anything. We work directly with the designers. We talk with the designers to really make something that is impactful. We're also exploring with 3D. We're exploring with Unity. More recently, as Lamia mentioned, we're using influencer content on UA. So it's more called like creator marketing because we're not using any influencer affiliate campaigns there. We're using our traditional UA channels, but with influencer content. The other thing we're doing and seeing a lot, especially on the casual space, is doing user-generated content. So not necessarily someone talking to the camera, but we're going to do hands solving a problem. So you would have a brain teaser, and instead of it being an animated cartoon, it's going to be someone solving it with their hand. And we found that this approach was super native to a lot of platform, and we will explore iterating on concept, doing a user-generated approach. So that's kind of the things we're exploring. And then in terms of format, we of course specialize in video. Video is still the preferred format in terms of delivery. But for other titles, if there's the possibility to play with really nice assets and cinematograph, we can explore statics. So Google and Facebook are a really good place to explore statics. And then on Snap, you have the story placement, which is kind of a tile of a news feed. And then you can play with statics and headlines and create something really catchy. So that's kind of what we're exploring, and then I think you can play a lot with the length of a video, and if you make it a long story that builds up, or if you make it something very short and snappy, but it really depends on what channel you're working with.
Fascinating. And in Lamia, and just at Tamatem, do you build all of your creatives in-house? Do you outsource to any third parties?
Actually, no, like everything is in-house. We tested like a couple of years back to outsource, and to be honest, like just as I mentioned, it's much better to do it in-house because the people at Tamatem know exactly what to work on and understand the culture a lot. So it's very different when you understand the culture. You know exactly what to do. You know exactly, as you mentioned, like even like the duration and everything in terms of what to do with the creative itself is it has to be in-house because once we tested to outsource, it was nothing like we wanted, and that's why like our creative team got bigger and bigger, and like we're scaling a lot on that front, and we're thinking of doing different, let's say, creative hubs at Tamatem in different countries, so we can scale this even bigger and bigger.
Fascinating. Just to really intrigued by that. So would you guys use third-party tools to aid your creative decision-making at all? Or would it all be kind of your own internal BI systems that you're kind of utilizing there, the learnings from the data therein as well?
Yeah, so again, like what we're trying to do, again, after ATT, things got much more difficult. So I tell you, it got into two different things where people got more data-driven, and we started building our own predictive models just to analyze the campaigns that we were doing. And at the same time, it got into more on the creative side where we're testing more and more. So everything is like internal. The data that we're seeing for our creatives or our campaigns are all based internally, and what we try to optimize, what we try to change, everything that we're doing, the networks that we're testing on, where to spend budgets here or there, the games that we decide to continue with it and believe like there's a huge potential for that game is all based on, let's say, the models and the creatives and the numbers that we're seeing behind the creatives.
Interesting. One of the more recent kind of ventures is kind of going into augmented reality. As everybody here probably knows, Snap is very prevalent in this particular vertical. You both had experience of AR. We're seeing the price point of AR starting to come down to a much more competitive level, and the democratization of AR is something that you both experience. I'd love to hear a little bit about your experiences on both. Elise, if you'd like to talk a little bit about what you've been doing with augmented reality to date.
Sure, and I have a Snap-specific example of that. So we were working with a partner where we, and I think Snap, developed some lenses. So we're able to do some campaign tests with lenses, showing the character games when you're trying the lens. And what was really interesting is that it was set up as a regular campaign. So we were able to track the engagement and the results from those lenses like we would with any UA campaign. And in terms of creative direction, that really informed our creative approach, because we ended up making creatives that we would film, like we filmed my coworker's kitchen, and then we added little character in VR to the background, and we kind of mixed real world and the game, and that was really informed by the engagement on those lenses. So yeah, there was a top performer for a while, and that was really, really interesting for us to do. So definitely looking forward to do more of that in the future. I think it hugely depends on the game assets, like the marketing assets we get from the game. If it's a lot of 3D, it's much easier to do than 2D, obviously. But yeah, super interesting approach, and I think it's quite Snap-specific as well.
That was the leading question. And Lamia, and as well for you guys as well, have you started to play around with AI? I know you've done some testing to date. Yeah. Love to hear your thoughts.
So yeah, actually, with outsourcing, actually, it's lenses. So like Snap worked on our lenses, and hopefully the team are going to get like a session with Snap on how to do lenses. It was very exciting for us because we worked on across all of our games for lenses, but the top performing were more on the female targeted games. So we have 2 games, Fashion Queen and Your Secret. And what we decided to do is like a mini game for these lenses, where you catch different things from like assets within the game. It was very engaging for the users, and like it was, let's say, a successful campaign to do with these lenses. So I guess it works a lot with the genres of the game. For our VIP Balut game, the cards game, it was a success, but not as much as I would say for Fashion Queen and Girl's Secret. And we're testing a lot with filters, actually. And for us, filters have seen great success. Just like very random filters, it can be anything, whether it has to do with holidays or a specific influencer name or a specific anything. So these, for us, worked a lot as well.
Super interesting. One of the things that Snap's been working on hugely effectively is bringing the price point of augmented reality down and making it much more competitive and performance-driven. And actually utilizing AR now as part of the auction is something that we're actively running. And yeah, if anybody wants to talk about it, very happy to do so afterwards. Wanted to just ask a little bit about how you kind of see 2022 panning out. We've midway through February already. What does this year, or how is this year turning out? We're nearly a year into ATT. We're into a year of limited visibility on a user level, but obviously a year's worth of learnings from a creative standpoint. What are those key learnings, and what recommendations would you make? Lamia, I'll throw the question to you first.
Actually, yeah, I believe like every single year has a surprise element to it. No one expected like 2020, even 2021, and now we're in 2022, and so far things have been going so fast. So many things happened within the first month and a half in Tamatem, actually, and then across the industry. We're very excited about this year. We have a lot of projects coming up, and we have a lot of publishing games that we're working on as well. I have no idea what 2022 will bring. There is a lot of like different things happening in the industry, whether there is acquisitions or whether with like NFT gaming and Web3 and so on and so forth. So for us, we're focusing a lot on what we're trying to do. And 2022 for Tamatem will be like a drastic change of the things that we're implementing to do, because it's going to be much different than all the years we worked with, just because of the services and the new games that we're coming up with.
Interesting. Elise, and to you, what are your learnings?
I think we're still going to see creative at the center of user acquisition now even more than before, although our clients have adapted in terms of tracking performance and understanding their performance by looking at day 0 or day 1 ROI instead of looking at performance down the funnel. I think, yeah, creative iteration and exploration will be even more so the center of things. For the industry as a whole, I think we're seeing a lot of merger and acquisition in this last year, and I think the ball will keep rolling, and we will see more of that happening. Something I don't want it to happen, but might happen eventually, is Androids coming up with their own version of ATT, which is going to make our lives even more challenging, but I think we will be more like readier than we were. Because we have more solutions. And then, yeah, I think also gaming and NFT and crypto kind of coming together a lot more this coming year. Yeah, which is super exciting.
So we've almost got 5 minutes left, so I wanted to throw one more question at you. If we're looking at your top 3 recommendations from the back of this year, and for people that are starting to look at, well, not necessarily just looking at, but are starting to really invest in the creative piece, what from a UA creative agency would be your top 3 recommendations? Elise.
Take risks with your creatives. Take risk. It doesn't need to be a grotesque fake ad, but you can think outside of the box. You can look at other genres. You can look at what the app marketing is doing. That's one recommendation, right? Okay, more recommendations. Diversify your channels. I think before ATT, UA spend was heavily relying on Facebook, and we're seeing more diversification, and we're seeing a lot of volatility in all channels, and it's a lot harder to predict. So I think by diversifying the spend, there is less risk of everything not working at the same time. And then a third recommendation is let Miri grow through your creatives.
Great answer. Lamia, as a developer and as and somebody who's seen incredible growth over the last 12 months, what would be your 3 recommendations to the developer community? To what, sorry? To the developer community from a creative standpoint.
Okay, interesting. So from a creative standpoint, I would say I agree with all of your points actually, and the last point as well. But I really think you should test with different creatives and understand why each creative is working. This is something very crucial. And from that creative, do a lot of different creatives to enhance this creative. And give it time. So a lot of people would just give a creative a week, maximum 2 weeks. I would say give it more time and be patient with your creatives and give them their time and give your campaign the time it needs. Because a lot of things can change with that. For us, what we saw after ATT, we would judge a creative or a theme or ad theme of creatives instantly and then see huge return within the next month or 2. And this happened a lot with us. So give it time. What else? I would say be very data-driven, to be honest. I know we're talking about creatives, but data is key. Build your own predictive models. Look at data. It gives you, it's such an eye-opener to everything that you're going to do. So I would say, since now retention and return on ad spend is not very clear for us because of there's no cohort data, I would say look a lot into CTR, look a lot into users that are coming from certain campaigns, how much they're spending, because you can know a lot about them. One last thing I would like to add is if you really put your creatives into ad themes, I'll tell you it's like a game changer. You'll have so much more information and clarity to everything that you're doing.
So be daring, test, and one size certainly doesn't fit all. Amazing, thank you. I'm going to throw it open to the floor. If anybody's got any questions for Lamia, for Elise, or even myself, please ask away.
Guys. So does anyone have any questions? I'm going to chuck one at you, because I think what it feels to me, it's actually resonating with some stuff that Tara said earlier on today. And it seems like there's really understanding the micro communities, like really understanding like the interest groups, rather than trying to focus on individuals and their behaviour. Is that really the kind of core here? Are we trying to, can we be authentic to multiple communities in an integrated way, or is that too much of a tension to try and have one message across multiple communities? Love to know what you think about that.
For me, like, I really think that you should understand the user persona. Understand the users that you're targeting to, and again, do these creatives for a different user persona. If you believe that you have a game that works across so many users, it's not specific to anything, which is like, let's say, a casual game, work on different things to attract different kind of users. Because focusing on one thing only will not attract everyone. You need everyone to be attracted to your game within different ways of doing your creatives. So I'd say, like, you need to be specific to users. You need to think about the users you're auditing, you're targeting, and you need to know that who are you targeting. So MENA is huge, for example, but once we target GCC, it's completely different than once we target Levant, let's say. Two different audience completely. GCC is more on to, I want to brag about the things I have. Levant is more on, what's this game? I need to know whether I like it or not. I need to play this game, and that's it. So it's you have to think about who you're targeting, basically.
Yeah, I think it's fine to plan these high-level, simple messages, but you need to work out for each of these personas where do they live, what's the mode of use of the devices and the tools that they're using, and how does that affect their mood and behavior and receptiveness. So it means that whilst your top level, I think, is fine to be, in fact, should be consistent, the actual specific delivery needs to be really clear. Is that a reasonable summary?
I think just to add to that, I think gone are the days where you can just fire and forget. You can take a stock creative and just let it work. I think now you've got to make the creative work for you. And so whether or not that comes from multiple testing, iterating on what works, it's in order to be able to actually drive the conversions up and drive ROI, you've got to make the creative work for you.
And this is the difficulty, I think, if for small companies out there, for small indie developers, that's a really hard thing to do from scratch. And if you can find third parties who can help you, great. But I think as long as you're thinking authentically about who your players are and where you can find them, where they naturally live, and find the smallest possible route from them being where they are to playing that game, that to me is the crux of it. And you have to do the best you can and then improve as you have the chance to scale. Does that make sense? On that note, guys, thank you so much. That's been fantastic, really insightful.
Thank you.
I've been doing this for a long time. I loved every moment of this. Thank you.